interest of time and knowing that we have a number of people on the line already, we are going to start. Once again, welcome. My name is Brad Neal. I'm the Vice President of Strategic Partnerships here at the Insurance Institute of Canada. And we are joined today to have a discussion around a day in the life of the MGA. We are very fortunate to be joined by a diverse panel of MGA experts to talk about what their average day looks like, and hopefully share with you some insights about how your day-to-day life might be different in the MGA world. I am joined today by Alicia Campbell, an underwriter at Pacific Marine Underwriting, Samantha Cooper, who is the National Business Development Manager at Trinity Underwriting, and Ian Mitchell, who's the underwriting team lead at CanSure. Welcome to our panelists, and if we could just give the audience a brief background on your insurance journey to this point, and we'll take it from there. Alicia, would you care to join?
Yeah, of course. So I'm Alicia Campbell. I am a underwriter here for Pacific Marine Eastern Canada. I've been with Pacific Marine for 5 years. I've also been in the insurance industry for 5 years. So my mindset might be a little different than Samantha and Ian's. But yeah, that's a little bit about me. I started here as a summer student and I'm still here.
Wonderful. Well, that's a great endorsement for Pacific Marine. Excellent. And Samantha.
Hi, everyone. I'm Samantha Cooper. I'm the Business Development Manager at Trinity Underwriting. I've been with Trinity it'll be 2 years in May. And prior to that, I was in the restoration industry. So I worked for ServiceMaster, doing business development for them for a couple of years in Ontario. And prior to that, I worked for Paul Davis Restoration at their head office as well, but more focused on marketing with the franchisees. So that was my start to insurance, really, which is just such a small piece of the insurance industry, really, the restoration side of things. And then, yeah, I've moved over to Trinity, and yeah, it's been a great ride so far. Big learning curve, but good.
All right. Well, that sounds great. Thank you very much for sharing that. And Ian.
Hi, my name is Ian Mitchell. I'm in the underwriting team lead at CanSure. I've been at CanSure since January 2020. I lead a team of junior underwriters. My role is pretty much to mentor and coach them, help them along their way. Previous to CanSure, I was at another MGA called K&K, which specializes in sports and recreation. But I started my insurance journey all the way back in 2005. I'm old. I look younger than I am, maybe. But that's pretty much it.
That's great. Okay, so as everyone can see, we have a very diverse group of folks with us on the panel. And I guess one of the things when we look at the MGA marketplace, we're always hearing that it's different than the rest of the industry. And I guess if you could maybe give the audience an idea of when you thought of insurance at 20 years old, what did you think insurance was? And now that you're in the MGA space, has that changed? Does it change your perception of insurance being in the MGA marketplace? And Samantha, I'll ask you to lead us off on this one.
Yeah, so I guess my perception of and what the insurance industry was before, to be honest, I thought it was boring. I thought it didn't seem very exciting to me at all. But I think I'm here and I'm here to stay now, having gone from restoration and now working for an MGA, because it's so interesting to, I have conversations with brokers a lot, and they call me and they say, I have this really interesting risk. And just to find out the types of risks that are out there. So whether it be an architectural technologist or something weird and wacky, our underwriters have to go through that and assess it and find out, what the real risk is there. And I think no risk is the same. It's all very different. And every day in this job is so different from the last. So it's fast paced, and and we're learning a lot in this industry as well. So it's definitely changed from what I thought it was before.
I guess so. I'm not even sure what an architectural technologist does, but if you could share a little bit of that with us later on, that would be, I'd be
Sure
interested to hear.
Yeah.
Ian, how about yourself?
So my father actually works in insurance. So insurance has kind of been part of my life since I was born. However, I can't say that I paid attention too much to what he talked about at the dinner table when I was a kid. I started my career when I was 22, shortly after school. For me, it was an opportunity just to get some office experience while I figured out what I wanted to do with my life. Fast forward many years, gray hair, here I am, still in the industry. The perception for me was that's what my dad did for a living. In reality, it was an opportunity for me to change my life and set a career path for myself. I've come to realize that, especially in the MGA world, there's no roadblocks when it comes to what classes of business that you might come across. You can align some outside interests with your career. For me, it was sports and recreation. And yeah, anything's possible working for an MGA in today's climate. So
Excellent. Thank you for that insight. And Alicia, how about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I've been in the industry for about 5 years. When I first started, I was a summer student. So to be honest, my opinion at the time was find a job. Right out of school, find a job, right? I'm not gonna cut any corners there. That's what I was looking for. Through that, I have a background, a degree in geography and a diploma in law clerk, right? So the ability to sit here every day and listen to my coworkers, even as a summer student, showed me that I was able to use the knowledge that I have in other fields that I've learned from in my day-to-day life that I never thought possible before actually physically being here. And listening to those conversations, listening to my peers have actual conversations about things that I learned through other avenues. And I mean, with my law background, a contract's a contract, right? So the basics were there, and the ability to use what I've learned in my day-to-day has only allowed me to improve my conversations with people and my ability to grow within the company and within the industry as a whole.
Wonderful. And you all touched on this. It's that interesting risks, no roadblocks, being able to use geography, law background. I'm sure we can all relate to that in the standard marketplace. But in your role, for instance, Ian, when you say there's no roadblocks to what you can do, what are some differences in the day-to-day life you would have than when you were working maybe prior to the MGA space? And how is it different? Not so much your perspective as a 20-year-old till now, but having been in the standard industry and then moving to the MGA space, how has that changed?
So I think the biggest difference is what you're being exposed to. Standard markets are very box underwriting oriented. They like what they like, they know what they like, and they stick to that. The MGA side, not really the case. I mean, every company out there has their preferred appetite, but it's expanded. It's a lot more expanded than a standard market. So when I started, at least on the MGA side, it was with a specialty market that focused on sports and rec. At the time, I didn't even know that there were markets out there that only wrote sports and rec, you know. But I grew up playing sports, and it seemed like a good fit at the time. Part of that was being able to underwrite motorsports, which again, you watch motorsports on TV, but you never actually think of what the impact insurance might have on it. A few years into my career, I took over the motorsports book. I was able to go to Formula One, IndyCar, insure stock car racing in Canada. One of the aspects of that job was to go and do risk management on site. I would attend the race weekends in Montreal and Toronto. I'd have to do a track walk, Wednesday, Thursday leading up to the weekends. The track walk would include making sure manhole covers were welded to the ground so they didn't fly up from the forces that the cars would cause when they went over them. Making sure that the fence integrity was good, so if anything flew off a car in an accident, it wouldn't end up in the stands. Make sure there's no debris on the track again, so it doesn't fly into the stands. For F1 in Montreal, we were insuring the spectator liability, which means that essentially if anybody got hurt, we are liable. The racing itself is insured in a separate policy. The interesting thing about F1 in Montreal, of course, in Quebec, it is BYOB. You're allowed to roll up to the front gates with your ticket with 24 beers in hand and bring them inside and drink them all day. You can understand that there's some exposure that goes along with that. Sunday, 160,000 fans having a good time. I was lucky enough to not have any liquor related losses while I was on the account. That right there, I don't think you would get the opportunity to do if you were working at a standard market. Other risks that have come across my desk that I find to be very specific to the MGA space would be fireworks manufacturers, expeditions to Antarctica, some of the NHL outdoor events. These are not risks that standard markets generally want to look at or are comfortable looking at. I think that's kind of what the difference is between the standard market and the MGA world, at least from my perspective.
That is fascinating. I worked for over 10 years at an insurance company and 10 years as a broker, and I never had anything like that cross my desk. So that definitely, as a day-to-day, getting to walk the track in an F1 alone would be something that would be pretty fantastic to do. Well, that's
Absolutely.
great. Thanks, Ian.
No problem.
Samantha, how about yourself? How have you found that working in an MGA really allows you to have a different view of the industry than maybe you had even at the restoration company?
Yeah, I mean, my experience at an MGA is going to be different from maybe Ian's or Alicia's. They're all, we're all different companies, and we're quite small. We're 18 people, so we're more kind of in a startup phase. But I report directly to the president. So if I have ideas, I can implement my ideas. If I think, and then if our underwriters think we want to get into writing a new, introducing a new product, we have the flexibility to do that. And one of the cool things about our underwriters and our team specifically is, they're looking for ways to write the risk. We're always looking for ways to help the broker. So, as a standard carrier might say, how do I get out of writing this? And they might try not to write it. We're intrigued by the weird and wonderful. We love the standard vanilla risks as well. Like, we're very much focused in the technology, healthcare, life science sector is something we really specialize in. So do we love IT consultants? Yes, they're very easy to write. Can we consider something strange like robots that scan stock in grocery stores? Absolutely. We've done some really cool things. We wrote one that was for technology that captures CO2 from the air and removes it and produces clean fuels. And another initiative that we're working towards this year is we want to support more companies that are out there trying to help and save the environment, rather than to try and underwrite and work with companies that are polluting it. So, we love innovation, is something that we do a lot, that we support a lot of innovative companies here. And it's a really interesting space, especially right now in this type of market.
No question. And as you say, when you're looking at the environment and climate change, there's no question there's purpose to that work as well.
Mm-hmm.
No question. And Alicia, how about yourself in the marine space? Speaking of water.
Yeah, being able to be an expert in your field through an MGA and the ability to maybe see exposures that a broker that doesn't deal with a large marine portfolio, or a company that has a small, maybe one-person team of a marine underwriter, without the ability to bounce ideas off your coworkers. You don't see certain things. I know here, especially for Ontario, boating season is 4 months long, if that, right? So a lot of people don't see the value of insuring your boat on an annual policy, or the value of having insurance in the off season. Kind of jumping on Samantha's pollution thing, the value of having that liability covering you for pollution, wreck removal, things like that, right? The things that the Ministry of the Environment is going to stick you with the bill if you were to have an oil spill, or even being able to mitigate that loss further, right? We teach a REWO accredited seminar here, and part of it goes over a marine claim where a boat does partially submerged. Well, within that claim, you need a crane to come out and take that boat out of the water. Well, cranes don't float, right? Like that's not something that you can just put into the water and make amphibious. So then you have to put your crane on a barge. Then you have to float a barge over that has a massive crane on it. Obviously, the laws of physics there just are beyond what makes sense to me. And then you have a crane pulling out a large boat, double its size, trying to prevent any further pollution exposure, any further loss, because then you have the engineers out there, the surveyors, things like that. So there's a lot of things that behind the scenes we know now, but are not always relevant to the naked eye. With that, again, in the off season, things like, I mean, when I first started here, there was a family of cats living in a boat, and that family of cats, actually, it was a total loss due to just the smell and everything like that. Not something you would never think of until it comes across, right? Until it happens to you, you never think of it. And that's a lot of aspects of insurance, but I think because for marine insurance, you think boating season, you think impact damage on the water and things like that. You don't really see those exposures that us as the experts in our field are designed to see. So I think that's something, again, something that really interesting that came across my desk a couple weeks ago is a boat that actually was completely refitted to look like a semi-truck. So it's a pontoon, it's got pontoons. Again, for a standard market, that would be a no straight up, because again, it's not something that fits the mold of a typical vessel. But for us, all of us had a 2-hour-long conversation about how we're going to make this work. How are we going to rate it? Is it a pontoon? Is it a cruiser? They've added all these additional accessories and features that it's our job to find those coverages and be able to issue that policy, which we were able to proceed with a policy there. And now if he has any friends or family that decide to do the same thing, they know where to come.
Excellent. That's a great example, and I never would have thought of that. I wonder, were they taking it up the canal to Ottawa?
I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah, they were actually in Manitoba. I mean, I don't know purpose. I think it was more of like a retired project for a retired person, and to just kind of leave at the dock and use as a cottage in the off season.
Wow. And just listening to what you were talking about, welding down manhole covers so an F1 car doesn't suck it off as it runs by. Architectural technologist. I have no idea what they do, but I have to think there's a lot of liability attached to that. And what you're talking about, Alicia, with boats and things that you were talking about, I would never think about that. Obviously, it's the specialized knowledge and service that MGAs are known for, but how do you gain that specialized knowledge? And Alicia, I mean, you started there at a summer job, so maybe you don't have anything to compare it to, but how did you gain that knowledge to be able to underwrite these special risks?
Yeah, I mean, we are similar to Samantha, a very small company here, but the ability to have those conversations, right? We're not just a number within an organization. I'm able to communicate directly with my superiors about things that I see that come across my desk, things that we maybe aren't the best on, or things that we are better than we think we are. Again, for myself, because I came directly out of school into this industry, I had a very limited knowledge of the industry. And to be honest, I didn't know what an MGA was when I first started working here. Over the last couple of years, I've actually been participating in the CMGA course through the Institute, which for me personally, as a Lloyd's cover holder, Pacific Marine, I learned a lot about the conversations that I'm not a part of, but that affect my day-to-day life and the things that I do. And it's been allowed me to, for those future conversations, the ability to grow within the company when I'm ready to be in those management roles or those roles where I can have those conversations. I have the knowledge now to have those without having to, I don't know, look at other aspects or go to other people, right? So between learning day-to-day, listening to my peers, as well as listening to those conversations and being able to actually contribute the information behind those conversations, along with now through the course, understanding why they happen and how they happen has really shown me that I do have a future within this industry and a potential to grow further.
Okay, so it sounds like a lot of hallway learning, as I call it, water cooler learning, but you've supplemented that with some structured learning as well with the course, which is great to hear.
Yeah.
And Samantha, coming from a restoration company to a specialized MGA, how did that learning curve happen for you?
Yeah, so it's definitely tricky when I started because we haven't been in the office due to COVID, and so if things were normal, I would have spent a lot more time with the underwriting team. But I started joining their meetings virtually. So, I mean, my first couple things that I did when I started was I did take 2 courses with the Insurance Institute. If anyone's interested, there's one on E&O and D&O. I think they're each like an hour and a half, and they're only like, they're quite inexpensive as well. I found those to be incredibly valuable. And then I've been sitting in on the underwriting meetings. That was the best way that I could get a sense of the appetite, because even sometimes I might think that we can write something, but there'll be one small piece of it that we're not interested in. And so, when I started, brokers would, talk to me about a submission. I would say, okay, yeah, send it in. And we would decline everything. And so I said, okay, here we go. I really have to broaden my knowledge and understand better. So another cool thing that our underwriting team does, so they have a couple weekly meetings, and they go through risks that they have on their desk, and they ask Sarah, who's our AVP of specialty lines, any questions about the risks. And then we've also been doing I haven't, but the underwriting team has been doing underwriting exercises. So they'll go through a risk, something either in tech or miscellaneous professionals, and she'll walk the team through it. They'll break off and everyone will underwrite it themselves and come back and compare and contrast. And I think that's one of the best ways really to learn.
Yeah, and I would think those underwriting meetings would be great, because I'm sure you get some very interesting claim situations that you would never think of. That's what I always found interesting about claims. Stuff comes up that, how did that ever happen? And Ian, coming over to you, you talked about somebody pulling up to a day-long race event with a 2 for a beer. That screams red flag to me, but obviously you underwrote it successfully. How did you gain that knowledge to be able to do that kind of work?
So prior to my MGA experience, which would be my last role, was my first introduction to the MGA world. I did work at some standard markets. I worked on the broker side for a little bit. That gave me a pretty good understanding of basic insurance. And then from there, I remember my first few weeks working at that MGA, new to the MGA space, new to high risk liability, and thinking, oh my God, I'm in over my head. I do not know what I'm doing. They've made a terrible mistake. Freaking out, calling my dad. He's like, no, you're going to be fine. You're going to be fine. Don't worry. I slowly gained some confidence. I was given time to learn and develop my skills as an underwriter. I had the best mentor you could ever want. She was always available to answer my many, many, many questions every single day, always had her door open. The approach at that company for me as a new underwriter was practical, was learned by doing. I had the previous foundation and knowledge from being on the standard side. But I had to apply it to learning the new class of business, and something I didn't know anything about aside from participating in sporting events, or drinking a beer at a beer garden. Now you got to think about it from the insurance standpoints. To what Alicia alluded to, we were also a small office. We often would just talk amongst ourselves about different risks. Everybody would have their inputs. If you had seen something that you had never seen before, something came across your desk, you could always just peek your head over the wall and ask the underwriter next to you. COVID's kind of changed that, the last 24 months for everybody. I've never actually worked in our office since I started at Cantor. I've always been at home. My whole team that I'm managing is in BC. Mm-hmm. So luckily, technology has stepped up. There's various platforms that you can have discussions as a group still. So that's kind of how I built my knowledge base, and and then applied it to my K-Insure career.
And it sounds like every one of you had a lot of that water cooler learning. It sounds very specialized, but very kind of as it occurs. That people are just using their history, their knowledge to bounce ideas off others to see how to find that insurable risk. What I'm wondering is, when you think back to it, we always talk about how do we handle risk. Bless you.
Thank you.
But are there any, I guess, threads that flow through when you, Ian, when you think of insuring entertainment risks and now construction risks? Alicia, I know maybe there's something between large boats and smaller boats. And Samantha, when you look at what you were doing with the restoration to now at the MGA, are there any threads that flow through that so that somebody listening to this might say, you know what, yeah, I can relate to that part of the job, and I kind of do that now, but that's how the MGAs are different?
Yeah, so I think if you have a standard understanding of insurance and how insurance operates, whether it's personal lines or commercial, you can take that knowledge and that learning, however you went through your learning process, and apply it to understanding new risks. You have to have the mindset to be able to do it, though. I mean, not everybody can be an underwriter. Not everybody can be in business development. You kind of have to have that personality, but all that personality is an open mindfulness to do it. There's not a whole lot of similarities between, a motorsports risk and a construction risk. But the fact that I could figure out how to underwrite a motorsport risk made figuring out how to underwrite construction a lot easier. Those are my 2 points.
That's a great point. I mean, I wouldn't make that connection, but obviously there's some element of risk, basic understanding that you were able to build on. Alicia or Samantha, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, right, the basics of insurance, that framework that you have in place isn't going to change. The concept isn't going to change. I think the ability, and again, as an underwriter through an MGA, the ability to fill the gaps within the market and the ability to find a solution is also not going to change, whether you're working with Ian at K-Insure doing construction or you're doing D&O, right? Like, our role as an underwriter through an MGA especially is to fill those gaps and find a solution. So I think if you kind of take out the risk in itself and put your mindset to the fact that it's your job to find the solution, but to also stay within your authority, right? Then it becomes more of a common, we all have a common denominator between the three of us. And then for my personal experience, just throw a boat in there, right? So I think the basics are there, and our job as underwriters and our job working for an MGA is the same in general. Our role is what we're supposed to do, and our end goal is going to be the same, whether the risk changes from a sporting event to a boat to a D&O policy, things like that. So that's at least my opinion on it there.
Excellent. And Samantha?
Yeah, I think, my knowledge that transferred over. What I was doing before was, I was the business development manager. So I was meeting with brokers, claims managers, and, pitching on, sending their claims to our restoration company. So coming over and doing this, it's shifted because, we're looking for new business submissions. There's a lot more of those, and there are claims, which is great. And now, having had the claims background in property helps me understand why, we don't want to write a lot of property at Trinity, for example. It's not something we want to specialize in because it's known for having a lot of claims. And so I think having a background understanding of the claims process helped me understand, when we look at a risk, what parts of it stand out to me, what things do I think we would want to typically avoid. And then there's sometimes where I'm really surprised, where I think I thought we would have written that for sure. And then the underwriter explains to me why. And I say, oh, okay, that makes a lot of sense, but I never would have thought about that. So, I mean, I think you're continuously learning. You're constantly adding and adding to your insurance knowledge. And you might think you know everything, and then you get thrown, a boat with cats in it and not know what to do. So, yeah.
Just to be clear, that would be a decline for me. Sorry,
Yeah.
I'd be declining that. That would be a referral over to Pacific Marine.
And you bring up an interesting point, though. Can you share with us some of those kind of weird things that have come up that you never would have thought of, even now that you're working at the MGA? It's like, why would we decline that? Are you able to share that?
Well, there was one, and I should have known this, but it was we don't insure. So we do have a little bit of, we have a sports division as well. And one thing we don't insure is professional athletes. And that makes sense to me. But I remember we had a submission come in for a Pilates instructor that teaches online videos and virtual training online. And she said sometimes some professional athletes will attend some of the classes. So I'm like, okay, that's not that big of a deal. It's just a little Pilates class. Well, if they somehow do injure themselves, then that's really bad, because they're going to be out for their season of whatever sport they're in. So that's one example of something that I just was like, okay, that does make a lot of sense, but you don't think about it firsthand.
Yeah, that's wild, because it'd be like you coming here and doing a webinar. You wouldn't think there's a risk to that, especially when you're a professional athlete. How are you going to hurt yourself doing Pilates?
Yeah.
Wow. Now, how about you, Alicia or Ian? Do you guys, is there anything like that somebody on the line here would think, wow, I never really thought of that, whether it be commercial, the boating, commercial construction, or the entertainment side? So Alicia, if you want to
go.
Oh, okay.
Mine's actually a floating risk. So the first thing that I can think of, we used to see a lot more of them, and they're still around, but those floating obstacle courses that they put outside of resorts. So they're inflatable, there's a trampoline, there's a slide.
Okay.
So we used to get a bunch of those in, and on the surface you're like, okay, well, generally it's in shallow water. What could possibly go wrong? People are wearing life jackets. My first thought is, if I was staying at that resort and it was 11:30 at night and I had had a few drinks, would I maybe swim out and go use it for free? And then if I've had a few drinks, what are the chances that I will drown? And for those reasons, I decline that risk.
I think those are pretty obvious concerns, but it kind of speaks also to the common sense approach too, right?
Absolutely.
Even though it is specialized, it's still common sense risk assessment. Yeah, that's great. Now, how about you, Alicia? Anything that kind of jumps to mind?
Well, yeah, similar to and something that you wouldn't typically see floating, something that we're seeing a lot common here in Ontario now, in like the Toronto Harbor area, and I think in the West Coast it's been more common over the last years, but floating homes, right? So people actually essentially a home on a barge. Well, to me, that's not a boat, right? But then you have houseboats. So you've got floating homes and houseboats. One you can do, one you can't do. And what's really the difference? So that's something over the last year we've had to kind of distinguish between the two, right? Because to one of us, we can do one of the things and we can't do the other one. Again, with that is something that isn't quite obvious because it's a little bit different than auto insurance, is the whole concept that we actually, folks that are older are higher risk to us. So we're typically larger premiums, larger deductibles, more exclusions, things like that. The claim statistics behind older boats, as you wouldn't expect, are greatly higher, as well as the costs of disposing of parts. So the risk of lead paint, things like that you typically wouldn't assume, right? As well as, because at Pacific Marine, we are pleasure use only. So we're just personal boats, just your typical in the summer, maybe down south when you're going to Florida if you're a snowbird. But people using their boats commercially with no revenue coming back into them. So things like real estate agents showing a water property. Well, to get that really wow factor for them, taking their clients out on their personal boat is a good selling feature. That's something that we can do because it's not really a commercial risk fully because it is their personal boat, but then it's also a little bit in the gray area of pleasure use only for us. So this ability to add extensions and endorsements to cover those people, or the people that do the Great Loop, which I'm sure a lot of you don't know what that is. It's when somebody goes right here from Ontario across the East Coast, down along the coastal waters and back up through the inland waters of Florida and the southern states. So there's the aspect of going internationally. That's a risk within itself, along with right now with COVID and potential different regulations and implementations through countries, states, provinces, things like that, that you have to also keep in mind, as well as the different types of water that have impact on boats. So we see saltwater impacts the boats and hull integrity a lot more than freshwater. So things like that you typically wouldn't think of on the top of your head, but we have to think about it for those one-off risks that we see people trying to do that loop there.
That is interesting, and I never thought of lead paint. Don't
Yeah,
ask me why, but that never would have occurred.
the Ministry of the Environment actually charges a $2,500 disposal fee right off the top if any boat is over 15 years old, whether it has lead paint or not, just because of the potential lead paint exposure in there, or the other risks to the environment. So that in itself there already eats up that $2,500 worth of your liability limit when we're just the wreck removal portion of it, right? That as underwriters we think of, but somebody who has been taking care of this boat for the last 35 years and think it's the best boat in the marina and it's their prized possession may not have that same opinion. So the ability to kind of express that, but also rate it accordingly.
Yeah. And listening to all three of you, you hear the entrepreneurial side of things. You talk through risks, you figure out how to cover them. I hear that about the MGA market space, that it's an entrepreneurial mindset. Would you agree with that? Do you see it as entrepreneurial now that you're in it, or do you see that just kind of how you do business? And Samantha, why don't you go first on that one?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely entrepreneurial. I think MGAs were created to step in and offer coverage where standard markets were, getting out of writing certain risks or cutting capacities. And so while major markets appetites are shrinking, ours has continued to grow. Our appetite hasn't changed. And I can't speak to the other two MGAs, but I think for the most part, we're looking to increase our appetite and for more opportunities out there to help our brokers through these situations, where some of the standard markets might be cutting those. So I think it's definitely entrepreneurial. I think there's so much potential in this, in this industry working for an MGA, especially a smaller company like ours, for example, where, like I said, any idea, all ideas are considered: product ideas, marketing ideas, advertising ideas, which has been really great.
Excellent. And Ian, it looked like you were going to jump in there.
You know what? Sam pretty much covered off a lot of what I was going to say.
Sorry.
No, all good. I mean, I think we're all in the same boat, right? Like,
yeah.
As you said, major markets, standard markets, their appetites shrinking. They're what they previously would love to write are declining. They're coming to us, and we weren't necessarily set up to take on some of that standard business because it was never what we were looking to write in the first place. So we've had to adapt, especially over COVID, this hard markets, and done some product developments and been able to cover off some of those products that we didn't previously look at, but that we need to help our broker partners. Personally, at Canshare as well, our underwriters, we have segments within our company. So we've got a hospitality segment, a construction, professional lines, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe at a standard market, if you work in one of those divisions or segments, that is all you're looking at all day long. At Canshare, we actually support and encourage our underwriters to write multiple classes of business. Their day-to-day might be stuck in that segment, writing that business, But if they wanted to look at sports and rec, if they wanted to look at construction, if they wanted to look at restaurants, they wanted to look at commercial property, they're supported to go and look at that business and, you know, help grow our book of business by doing that. And I don't think that's an opportunity that you would necessarily get if you were at a standard market.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. It's a similar situation with us where underwriters are not sure what area, especially if they're junior or just coming out of school, they don't know which area is going to be the best fit for them. So they might start off writing healthcare and then end up writing engineers and decide, hey, I'm really interested in this and I want to stick with this. So I think the opportunity is there for people to really move around and then, you know, find where they think that they want to stay.
And it's interesting, you're talking about essentially finding a job that fits your hobby, as opposed to finding a job that you can build a career. You're really entertaining yourselves by getting it, like you said, Ian, working in motorsports or something that you found interesting, and that was your role. So that's pretty cool. And I see we've got a question here from Scott. And he's asking about claims. Do you have your own specially trained staff? What kind of expertise do you require for handling what could be considered non-traditional claims?
So I can't speak to claims. I've never worked in claims, but Canture does have its own claims department. We do handle all of our own claims in-house through authority from our markets. I can't go into the specifics of you know what authority they have, but I do know that we have a team of about 23 people that handle all of our claims in-house, whether they're on Lloyd's contracts or domestic.
Okay, great.
It's similar to us as well. We work with a third-party company that handles all of our claims in-house as well. And they've been in business for 40 years experience or something like that. And yeah, we have full confidence in their capabilities of doing that. But yeah, I think that's all I was going to say.
Right.
Yeah, similar here as well. We work with a third-party company, and then we also work with marine surveyors as kind of the eyes and ears on the ground between the insured and the adjusting company to have that expert knowledge when the adjuster can't physically be there. But we do work with a third-party company as well for our claims.
Okay, great. And also, somebody else has put in the chat that there's a lot of interesting risks being discussed, which I think kind of speaks to a day in the life of an MGA. But they're asking if you do a lot of work with Lloyd's, and I just am not sure of your business mixes. So if you guys could just
I can go first.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so we're backed by HDI Specialty and Lloyd's, and so we have all in-house underwriting authorities. So basically, they gave us the pen, and we underwrite all of our risks ourselves in-house. So it's neat that way because we can control the turnaround time and the quote, and so we're not necessarily waiting for someone in London, to get back to us on some things. But we do have some referrals that are outside of our authorities, so that we will send off to them as well. But for the most part, if we can do it in-house ourselves, we will.
Yeah, which speaks to that speed, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we're actually very similar to Samantha. We are a cover holder of Lloyd's here. And because my experience is only with this one company, my experience has only been as a cover holder of Lloyd's. But again, we have our ability to underwrite, issue documents, bind policies within our given authority, and then we refer to Lloyd's for anything beyond our authority. And we also have the ability to refer to the open market for like excess or reinsurance for additional liability exposure when those boats are down south.
Okay, great.
Yep.
How about you, Ian?
Yeah, so Canture has, I know based on my segment construction, we have 10 domestic contracts. We work with a handful of open market companies, and then we also have London. We utilize brokers in London to help, build capacity. If I'm working on a $40 million frame COC project or like $100 million frame COC project, we can build up to those limits with the help of London. But generally, we stick to our DUAs, our designated underwriting authority, and use our domestic contracts to fill these limits and these policies.
Great. And I think you kind of touched on this a bit before, Ian, but how has the MGA world changed as we've gone from a soft market, which seems like forever ago now, to this hard market?
I think the biggest change is filling in the gaps that the standard market's left behind. I feel like we've been negative towards the standard market. They have their place, in the insurance world. We rely on the contracts that we have with them to service our clients. But their appetites have definitely shrunk since the hard market came into play. We've had to pick up some of those exposures, which is good because it's given us an opportunity to grow our product offerings, continue to service our clients, and generally grow our book of business. So I think that's the biggest change. Pricing's a little bit different now than it was.
For sure.
Sorry to the brokers watching, but our hands are tied.
Okay, Alicia, how about you?
Yeah, I think, personally, I've only ever experienced a hard market, again, due to my only 5 years experience. But again, I have seen quite a few changes over those 5 years due to the hard market. But I think from the MGA aspect, I think it's slowly becoming less of, MGAs are less of a substandard market and more of an extension to the standard market as an expert and specialist in what we do. So rather than being seen as a secondary option, we're being seen as an equal, if not more specialized option. And that's due to the hard market and our ability to adapt to the market, whereas some other standard insurers may not have that ability that we do, with flexibility there.
Excellent. All right. How about you, Samantha?
I think pricing has been a big one for us, because we write D&O, and the D&O market has been really, really tough. There's been just so many claims, and our pricing prior to the hard market was really low. And so, we hired a financial lines manager, and she really had her work cut out for her when she joined, because she had to give all of our brokers, scary increases. But she really was very skilled in explaining and justifying the increase so that the brokers could go back to their clients and say, hey, here's why, because of this, this, and this. And I think just the more we educate them on, on the reasons for our pricing and break that information down, I think helps a lot. But yeah, it's interesting, with what Ian said, with having to pick up sort of the pieces of what some of the standard markets have done. It can be challenging for MGAs to grow because we don't necessarily have contracts with these brokers, where brokers have contracts with the major markets, and so they have an expectation to reach a premium level. While we might get one risk from an insurance broker and never hear from them again, or we might get a bunch, but to get that momentum going, I think it's really important to be there for them when they need us, try and come through for them. And I think when you go above and beyond for a broker, they do remember. So that's how we grow our business. And like I said, explaining those pricing changes as well makes a huge difference.
No doubt. And let me ask each of you, we're talking about a day in the life. So what's one phrase that you hear most often in your day?
I can start here. Something that I hear a lot is, and then because like Samantha said, we don't have contracts with these brokers. So sometimes they come to us for that one-off situation. But having those conversations actually with an underwriter rather than waiting for the switchboard or things like that. The ability to have somebody say, well, I have you here, or well, I have you on the phone. Can we go over this? Or do you know somebody that can help me with this? Do you know somebody, if you can't help me, who can? And the ability to maybe refer that risk to Ian or Samantha because I can't help them also allows me to build a reputation with the broker that I know what I'm doing, and the ability to, okay, so I can't help you right now, but well, I have you here. I actually have a boat that came into me 2 days ago. What's your thoughts on this? So having those conversations and the ability to essentially keep them on the phone and have them run something by you that because they have you, they might as well. I think that's a good aspect of it, and something I hear every day is, well, I have you here. Since you're on the phone, here's 10 things. Let me know what you think.
Does that ring true for Ian and Samantha as well?
Yeah, my answer was, Ian, can you help me? And to Alicia's point, like, I think that the relationships between MGAs is so critical, especially in today's markets. I met Sam and Alicia on the road. So, you know, getting out, meeting your peers, learning what they do, it's important because we do get calls from brokers, and I would love to write every single risk that came to CanSure. And I'm sure CanSure would love me to write every risk that came to CanSure, but sometimes it's not possible. There are things that come across our desk that we just are not the specialist in, or we don't have the capacity to write. Knowing who's where, what they're doing, what MGAs are offering, I have no problem referring business, especially if I know the person. I know they're going to take care of the broker. Right now, there's enough business to go around. I'd rather our broker be happy, you know, their clients happy, than just to say, no, I'm sorry, we can't do it.
Yeah, I completely agree with what Ian said, and I definitely try and, you know, be aware of who's writing what so that we can refer them business. Yeah, it's really important.
Okay. And I see that we're coming close to the end of our time here. We've got about 5 minutes left, but I want to give you an opportunity to share with the audience the one thing you would like them to take away from a day in the life of the MGA. Any advice or knowledge you'd like to share? And Samantha, would you care to go first?
Sure. I guess just, you know, if you have an entrepreneurial spirit and you're looking for something different where, you know, the capabilities are really endless with what you can do, and especially if you're not sure what you want to underwrite, or maybe you don't want to underwrite at all, maybe you want to be in sales and developing broker relationships. I just think it's such an interesting space, and just, you know, get out. I mean, when we can get out and, you know, attend industry events and just have conversations with people. Everyone, for the most part, is so nice and so approachable, and, you know, it's not as daunting as it looks to get into this space. You really just have to start having conversations with people and say, you know, tell me about what you're doing. I'm interested, because, you know, I didn't know very much about what Ian and Alicia were doing here. And I've learned so much even from just doing this panel, just from having conversations and comparing and contrasting what everyone's doing. So.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And Alicia?
I mean, I think coming from personally a summer student and being able to grow within one company shows a lot of what we can do here and how you might not be plateaued in a role. And I think from the MGA perspective, just knowing that MGAs kind of have a willingness to collaborate with brokers and a willingness to learn from brokers' questions and risks as well. And that's kind of my opinion on it. I mean, short and sweet, but I think just a willingness to write business, a willingness to collaborate with brokers, a willingness to refer, right? And just keep an open mind is really something I think is a good takeaway from all of this.
Fantastic. And Ian?
Yeah, so I'd say if you're currently working on the insurance side, you're drawn to the technical underwriting, the risk management side of the business. But you also want to develop kind of that relationship building, and you're not sure if you can, you know, blend the two roles in your current position. Or if you're on the broker side and you like selling and finding solutions for your clients, you also want to build up and get stronger on the underwriting side of the business and the risk management. I think an MGA would be a perfect place for you. We're the middle between our broker partners and the markets that we use for contracts. You know, we entertain some of the most unique risks in Canada. And I think it's fair to say that right now there's probably more MGAs operating in Canada than there ever have before. And that's due to the volume and the need for it. We've also hit a wall right now where everyone's been talking about this wall. It's coming up. There's going to be a point where, you know, there's more jobs available than people to fill them. I think if you're thinking about making a change, consider an MGA. You'll never be bored. You know, you might learn more than you could ever think you could learn, and it might just change your life. Thank you.
Excellent. And Samantha, I have to ask, we're almost at our time here, but I'd love to know, what does an architectural technologist do?
So they do, they work under engineers or architects. So we don't personally write architects, but the technologists basically do all the drawings and the planning in AutoCAD. It's an online program, and then it's an engineer typically or an architect that signs off on it. So not as high of a risk, but there still is risk involved.
Well, when I think of One World Trade Center or the Burj Khalifa or something, that's when I always think of an MGA, and that's you really brought that home with that kind of an example. So thank you for that. One thing you just touched on, Ian, and this is not about the Insurance Institute, but we do have these courses that allow you to gain the foundational knowledge that is required to work in the MGA. A lot of it is around the delegated underwriting authority that you talked about, Ian. And it also gets into the claims piece, how you set that up. So if you're interested in that, please feel free to go to the insuranceinstitute.ca website. The MGA courses are right there. But before we get to time, I wanted to thank our panelists. Thank you so much for coming and sharing your time and your expertise and insights with us. And I would like to thank our guests today for sharing your time with us. And we hope this was of value and you've taken away a different view of what an MGA does, and hopefully with some concrete learnings around what could be available in the MGA space moving forward as a career. So thank you all very much. Have yourselves a great afternoon, and no matter where you are across the country, hopefully the weather is good and you have a safe afternoon. Thank you all very much.